welcome everyone. I'm Barbara Gahn-Mueller, member of the Ending War 101 team, and it is my pleasure to have Helen Peacock, our co-founder of the Ending War 101 team, begin our meeting. Helen, it's up to you now to get us going.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. On behalf of the entire organizing committee for the Ending War 101 team, and you can recognize this if everyone could please wave. Most of us have the Ending War background or something.
Question and answer. And I'm
Yeah,
just
and
going to let
everybody could
folks
please
in.
mute themselves before we get started. That would be great. Mabuba, you need to mute, and Steve, if everyone could mute themselves, wonderful. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night, good tomorrow, whatever time of day it is for you. And thank you for coming to this, our fifth global movement meeting to build the movement to end war, to build the movement within Rotary and the intention within Rotary to work to end the use of war as a means of resolving conflict, and to build the movement outside Rotary as well. As I said, this is our fifth global meeting, and our first three global meetings were focused within Rotary entirely. All our speakers came from the Rotary family, and in fact, in our third meeting, we had 10 different speakers, all of them inspiring, and half of them young. I just want to point that out, half of them very young. So that was wonderful. And then we thought we'd change tack and focus on bringing in expertise from outside of Rotary to help us in our mission to end war. So 2 months ago, our speaker from outside of Rotary was David Swanson, co-founder of World Beyond War. And David gave us examples of more situations in which war was not chosen as a means of resolving conflict, and the conflict was resolved non-violently. And he also shared other insights and knowledge from the extensive research of World Beyond War. So that was the first of our series of going outside of Rotary. The second is today with Sam Dailey-Harris, and I know Barbara's going to introduce him in a moment, but I'll just say that about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, we, the Ending War organizing team, were blessed to have a one-on-one coaching session with Sam Dailey-Harris, and it was really inspiring. It was really inspiring. So it's just wonderful. He is going to help us become transformational advocates in spreading our message that war can be ended, and if it can be ended, it must be ended. So Barbara will say more in a moment. And then our third global meeting in this series is going to be about collaboration, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the meeting. So again, welcome to all of you. Thank you to Barbara for organizing this meeting, and I'm passing you the mic, Barbara, to please introduce Sam.
What a pleasure. You know, it's interesting because on my peacepodcast.org, I noticed there was a theme that people who had taken the results course by Sam Dailey-Harris, they had this magic of getting people to enroll in what they were so passionate about. So I said, I got to meet this Sam Dailey-Harris, and I did. And when I met the Sam Dailey-Harris, I just couldn't believe it, because listen to this. Sam Dailey-Harris founded Results Educational Fund in 1980, co-founded the Microcredit Summit campaign with 1995 with the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus. And then he founded Civic Courage in 2012. He began coaching this citizens climate lobby months before it launched in 2007. So what did I find? I found that if I use his epic, and you'll get to hear what that is today, well, if I use his epic, all of a sudden, I will be able to have a call to action at the end of my talk. So I tried it. I tried it in these Rotary Club meetings, and I would go through epic. And at the end, believe it or not, I would get a standing ovation. Now, I had been speaking for many years, but I didn't get standing ovations every time I spoke. So here he is, the author of Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. And so I asked him if we could take chapter 21 from his book and use it as our Bible for our Ending War 101, Making Peace Possible. He said, yes, if you give me credit. Well, we printed it out, and we've been using it ever since I met Sam. And so when you're ready to look at what we're facing today, You want to be a powerful person. You want to be a speaker who can ask for that call to action the results way. And so I know it works because I've been using it. He's been on NPR, he's been on PBS, and maybe you already know him because of his YouTube presence and because he's all over the media. And with that, Sam Dailey-Harris, I invite you to be our speaker today to give us the wisdom that you have attained, not only by your book, but because of the practical knowledge of introducing people to this formula and then making it possible for us to all be spokespeople for the passion we carry around. Sam Dailey-Harris, it's up to you to motivate us to be stronger and better and more powerful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Barbara, and the organizing team for Beyond Ending War 101. And everyone who's joined this call. I think I'm supposed to inspire you, but you've already inspired me just by your topic and your commitment. So I'm grateful for that. I'm going to speak to you, and then a little later in the talk, I'm going to start bringing up slides. I've been writing a lot of journalists trying to get their attention to transformational advocacy. And just after the election, I sent the following letter. I'm going to excerpt it to 300 journalists. And I want to read this excerpt from the letter just after the election. For many Americans, this election has delivered exhaustion and divisiveness. After the election, Tom Nichols wrote in The Atlantic, quote, Americans must stay engaged and make their voices heard at every turn. Liz Cheney tweeted, citizens across the country must now be the guardrails of democracy. But most Americans still wonder how, and even if, they can make a difference between elections. What are the options? Now, this is my letter to the journalists. What are the options? One, protesting. Important, but usually not the long game. Two, signing email form letters, which only 3% of congressional staff say is highly effective. Just gestures. Three, taking a 2-year nap until the next election. Sadly, the preferred route for many, but few in your audience know about 4, transformational advocacy, which helps you change an issue and changes you in the process. And this is the end of the letter. This book includes stories of people who met with elected officials on the other side of their issue, like Ellie Sparks, who went from experiencing what she called climate trauma to meeting with their members of Congress and calling the experience sacred and profound. And Lisa Jordan, who after meeting congressional offices in Washington, D.C., said, this work is the best medicine for when you're feeling hopeless or have sleepless nights. It's the best way to avoid despair. So that was my email to hundreds of journalists, one of several. So I'm going to begin my talk with one aspect of reclaiming our democracy, which is knowing your why and sharing it. Why do you do what you do? Why are you committed to this work? And I use this formulation developed by Marshall Gans, a professor at Harvard, who developed the story of self, which asks, what happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment? So I'm going to tell my story of self, but I want you to think about yours. Do you know it and share yours a lot? Or do you know it and hardly ever share it? Or do you need to take a moment and write down what happened in your life and what decisions did you make? So here's my story of self. It's a little wacky and I love to tell it. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music. And I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music. And 44 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results. And a lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend around high school graduation in 1964 and the assassination of U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in 1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, 1977, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this event thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I mean, it's inevitable in my mind because there must be no solutions. Again, what do I know? Because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. So I go to this event, and it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health, literacy. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People would just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students on ending world hunger, classroom by classroom. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger and others calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote him. I don't want to know if you met him, just the name. Out of 7,000 students asked, 200, fewer than 3%, could tell me the name of their member of Congress. 6,800, over 97%, could not tell me the name of their member of Congress. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand, and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. So that's what happened in my life, and what decisions did I make that got me to this commitment. What is your story of self? Think about it, or write it down if you need to. The book Reclaiming Our Democracy was originally released 30 years ago. So this is a completely revised and updated 2024 edition. But a lot of times I'm asked, why did you rewrite it? Why did you re-release it? And I was on a NPR interview program called 1A. And the question number 2 by the interviewer is a beautiful expression of why I reintroduced or re-released the book. This was question number 2 to a national audience. There had to be tens, hundreds of thousands listening. Question number 2. The passive nature to our politics now, you can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career. This is the interviewer. This is my career, and I feel beat down by it. It's much more of an effort for me. I don't participate the same way others because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you know that. What am I feeling? What is the way out of that? And the pain that he was expressing in question number 2 was a reflection of why I felt this book was needed more than ever. The first thing I said to him was, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, we aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth. We're the crew. Well, are we? And if we're crew, how does crew operate? Second thing I said was, futurist and climate activist Alex Steffens said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Well, yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. I'm not going to do anything about it. Why would I if nothing I do makes a difference? The last one, and then I'm going to bring up my slides. The main idea in Reclaiming Our Democracy is transformational advocacy. Now, we all know transactional advocacy, sign the petition, transaction complete. But with transformational advocacy, you're trained, encouraged, and succeed at doing things as an advocate you never thought you could do, like meet with a member of Congress and bring them on board to your peace issue, or write a letter to the editor on an issue you care about and have them published. And when you do those things that you didn't think you could do, you see yourself in a new light. You see yourself differently. A transformation basically takes place. Now, it's going to take me just a moment to get my slides up, and we're going to finish the rest of this with my slides. And if you give me a moment, I'm going to actually make it full screen, and that would be here and here. Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to tell a few stories. And the first one is Maxine Thomas. This is Maxine Thomas with her U.S. Senator Todd Young, Republican of Indiana. This is not a selfie. These two are buddies and they work together a lot. Maxine said to me, I had his heart for service, but I was clueless about advocacy, especially political advocacy. Maxine has a lived experience of poverty, and she joined a group called Circles, where people work together to learn more and move out of poverty. And her group realized that they had a story to tell. And they Googled around for groups that could help them tell their story. And they found the Anti-Poverty Lobby results, the one I founded, and they joined Results. Eventually, Maxine and two others get a scholarship to go to the Results conference in Washington, D.C. And Maxine borrows luggage. She goes to D.C. And the night before her first ever meeting with her members of Congress, she learns that the Earned Income Tax Credit is about to expire. The Earned Income Tax Credit in 2022 provided $3,100 to a low-income working family. And so this is transcribed from the book. This is Maxine speaking, and I've transcribed it onto these slides. Quote, the first congressional meeting on Lobby Day was with Senator Dan Coates, Republican of Indiana, and brought new ahas. He was there for the entire meeting. I can still feel it. I was a ball of emotions. It felt like an out-of-body experience. I was processing being in DC, and now I'm in an exclusive meeting. We're all dressed up. It was high level. The volunteers were polished and sharp, but I was scared. That's most people at their first ever meeting with their member of Congress. But I was scared, worried whether I would say the right thing. I think it was Lisa who asked me, would you like to say anything? I thanked the senator and said, I learned last night why I'm here. I didn't know I could come here from Indianapolis to talk to you, someone who represents us and can help us. I can't imagine what will happen if the Earned Income Tax Credit is taken away from families like mine. I'm able to take a deep breath and catch up on my bills because of the Earned Income Tax Credit. I look forward to tax time because that's the only time I can handle my financial burden. I like to take my kids to the mall to buy shoes without worrying if it'll take away from other bills. Senator Coates straightened himself up and said, wow, this has been emotional. Results, you do a good job of training people. Where did you find her? And then he thanked me. That was the year he retired. He was very connected, even though the Earned Income Tax Credit wasn't on his radar. He acknowledged my voice and thanked me for being there. End of quote. Now, after her first full day of meetings with her members of Congress, Maxine said, I was euphoric. I was on this high and felt I was part of something revolutionary. That is transformational advocacy, from clueless to euphoric. So how do you find an organization that's committed to delivering transformational advocacy? You look for three things. These are oversimplified, but one, recruitment and community building. Recruitment. The organization brings new people in, not to build an e-blast list, but forming them into local chapters so they're not working alone. Recruitment and community building has an all of organization webinar like this one, guest speakers, Q&A, inspiration, training. One, recruitment and community building. Two, training. How do you get the meeting with the elected? How do you plan for the meeting? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor? Two, training. The third thing that the organization delivers is breakthroughs. They encourage their members to move out of their comfort zone because confidence grows when you're trained and encouraged to do things that you thought you couldn't do. In the book, there's this drawing, small circle on the left, your comfort zone, and a much larger circle on the right labeled where the magic happens. You're looking for an organization that doesn't kick you out, but encourages you out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens. Next story. In 2019, President Trump called for a 29% cut to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria after it had saved 38 million lives. Where do we hear about saving 38? After it saved 38 million lives since its launch in 2002. It was time for the Global Fund's 3-year replenishment of funding, and other countries would likely follow the US lead. Now, most people never heard that President Trump called for a 29% cut. And if they did, they'd probably throw up their hands. What can you do? You can't fight City Hall. The folks I know roll up their sleeves and got to work. They got hundreds of members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to co-sponsor resolutions in House and Senate in support of the Global Fund, and sign letters to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the top appropriators in the House and Senate, all in support of the Global Fund. So what do these revolutionary volunteer advocates look like? Well, if you're on gallery view, they look exactly like you. And they also look like Margaret Smith from Dallas, Texas, seen here with her US Senator Ted Cruz, also Texas. She said to me, I learned in results that I hold Senator Cruz's hands with 2 hands, and I don't let go until I finish my laser talk on the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. That was the first year Senator Cruz ever said yes to one of their requests. He agreed to co-sponsor the Senate resolution supporting the Global Fund. Instead of President Trump's proposed 29% cut, 2 House Republicans and 2 House Democrats stood on a stage in Lyon, France at the Global Fund replenishment and announced that the Congress would provide a 16% increase to the Global Fund, which President Trump signed into law. By 2022, the Global Fund partnership had saved 59 million lives since its inception in 2002. Why does this matter at the individual level? And if I had a little more time, I'd read it. But there's a book called Race Against Time, Searching for Hope in AIDS-Ravaged Africa. It was a compilation of lectures by Stephen Lewis, who was UN Secretary General Kofi Annan's special envoy for AIDS in Africa. And in this one chapter, Lewis talks about going with Gracia Michel, the wife of the late Nelson Mandela, to visit a sibling-headed household in Uganda. Both parents had died of AIDS. This is 2005, just after the Global Fund was set up. Both parents died of AIDS. There were no other relatives around. The household was headed by the oldest child, the 14-year-old daughter. The youngest was an 8-year-old son. The oldest was the head of household, the 14-year-old daughter. That's why people like Margaret Smith work on things like the Global Fund. Next to last story, Ellie Sparks. This is Ellie Sparks. The story is when she was a volunteer. Now she's on staff. Ellie Sparks said to me, when I joined Citizens Climate Lobby, I was suffering from climate trauma. I would read Bill McKibben's book, Earth, and I would weep at home and I would weep at work. But then I joined CCL, and 18 months later, I was co-leading a workshop on building relationships with members of Congress and editorial writers. She said to me, our executive director at the time, Mark Reynolds, used to say, we're betting the farm on relationships. Now go get a relationship with your member of Congress and your editorial writer. And Ellie said, what in the world does a relationship with a member of Congress look like, and how do you get a relationship with your editorial writer? She said, some in our organization use the model of a work relationship. Now, this is transcribed. This is Ellie speaking in the book. And Ellie said, hold on, quote, My relationship model is different. I adore romantic relationships, so I use romance as my model. First meeting with the editorial writer, it's like a blind date, only you've decided beforehand you're going to marry this fellow. You're going to be sweet and interesting, not too intense. If it doesn't work out with the editor, you're going to marry one of his friends at the newspaper, business editor, environment writer, city editor, someone at this paper will find you interesting and compelling. It's just a matter of being persistent until you find the right connection. I see the relationship with a member of Congress as an arranged marriage. If you live in her district, the member has to meet with you. That's what our congressperson's legislative director told us in January. Now, this is August, so it's 8 months later. Since January, we've met 5 times with the legislative director. We schedule 45-minute meetings. He keeps us well over an hour. He doesn't want us to leave. Why? Because a good arranged marriage starts out cold and slowly heats up. That's different from a love match, which starts out hot and slowly cools down. Then Ellie shared the essence of transformational advocacy. Quote, during our conference, I met with 20 congressional offices over 4 days. I met with many folks whose view of the world was very different than mine. Going into their offices was hard. I had to let go of a lot of emotional baggage. I could no longer judge them or hold hostility in my heart toward them. I had to let go of my fear of climate change and my fear that they wouldn't listen to me. I had to center myself in love. Releasing fear and centering in love, this is sacred and profound work. End of quote. Who thinks about advocacy as being sacred and profound? Obviously, it can become that if you find the right organization and open yourself up to it. When I work with a group that's meeting with a member of Congress who opposes their bill, I have them ask these 3 questions. Question number 1, we know you don't support this bill. What would it take to change your mind? You're listening for assignments. 1, what would it take to change your mind? 2, could you say more about that? 3, why do you think that is? So it's basically a deep listening exercise. And some have used questions like this to get the first Republican and Democrat to lead the House Climate Solutions Caucus, which was launched in 2016 and grew to 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats. When President Trump was elected, the caucus fell to 6 and 6 because some had retired or lost their seat. Over the first 2 years of President Trump's first administration, the caucus grew to 45 Republicans and 45 Democrats. Actually, to the right is Jay Butera, the volunteer who led in forming the Climate Solutions Caucus. On the left is Carlos Curbelo, former member of Congress, Republican of Florida. And in the middle is Mia Love, former member of Congress, Republican of Utah. So when we get to Q&A, I'm going to put a sign-up sheet in the chat. And one of the options is to receive occasional updates from me. Basically, join my mailing list, the Civic Courage mailing list. Next is if you'd like to be connected with a group that works to deliver transformational advocacy. Next is if you'd like to host me doing probably a Zoom book talk to your church, your Rotary Club, a different club, a book club, you teach a class. And then if you are part of some other organization that would like to learn to implement transformational advocacy, I'm going to close with this. I'm going to read it twice. This is from George Bernard Shaw's Man and Superman. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole. This is you. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. And one more time, this is the true joy in life. The being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature, instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. And I am so grateful to you for your commitment to making that torch for peace burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. And I will stop my slides and I will put in the chat just a moment. And that's it. I thank you very much for your kindness and listening and being here. And this is that sign up sheet and then the book's website below that.